Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to Wrestling Memories. We've had a little bit of a hiatus, I think. Hasn't been a couple of weeks. A lot of our fans that watch us on Monday and Tuesday watch us here. For those of you that have been wondering that don't normally watch Monday and Tuesday with us, we're back. We're back for Trish versus Lita. I'm going to say this right now, and it'll be talked about extensively. This feud, to me, is the real evolution of the women's division. Not Becky and Sasha, not Becky and fucking Charlotte, not Becky and fucking Bayley.
Not even Paige and AJ.
Not even fucking Becky and Charlotte, period. This feud, right here, is what the women's evolution is and should be about. So we'll talk about that more. Heather will be moderating this tonight. She will also be doing her own show right after this. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. And we will be back in a few minutes as I'm just going to switch out with Heather. We're going to do the regular introduction and such, and we'll go from there. We'll see you guys in a few minutes.
What's going on out there, everybody? Hi, it's me running the show tonight.
God help us all. No.
Damn straight God help y'all. You better know your shit with this one, too, because this is one of my favorite rivalries of all time. Simply because of the people involved. As you can see, as it says right up there, we are talking about Trish and Lita and their major rivalry throughout basically the tail end of the Attitude Era into the Ruthless Aggression Era. So, with that being said, let me bring in my guests here. As usual, we got the famous Mr. Mike Bobbitt with us.
Hey, what's
Good
up?
talk.
Shut up, John.
And then we got Miss Ronnie.
Hi, everybody. Hope everybody had a good Valentine's Day.
And, of course, we got Trek as well on camera for this evening.
What's up, everyone?
And last but certainly not least, we got the Johnny Ray Sinister up in the rafters.
What's up, everybody? Happy day.
Yes. Happy Valentine's Day to those out there.
Bah humbug.
I did share a picture on Facebook that said it should be Halloween again, but whatever. Moving on here. Basically, with this feud, there were a lot of firsts that came along with this feud. You had the first two women to sit there and debut as valets and turn into wrestlers, and not the other way around. It was also with in the case of Lita, she was the first woman to basically not be afraid of that top rope. Any chance she got, she went there. Wasn't afraid of ladders either. With Trish, she was the first fitness model to become a valet and then a wrestler. Excuse me. And as JP said, these were the women that got the evolution and started and put the women on in the spotlight, basically.
And not fucking bra and panty matches either.
Right.
There is one more first that is probably the most important one, and I think they do a little bit too much of these days, and that is they were the first two to main event Monday Night Raw.
That is true.
I was just getting to that, yes. They were the first to do that. They had the first in many years intergender tag team match between Trish and Lita versus Chris Jericho and Christian in a Battle of the Sexes match. How you doing, Simon Cowell? But when it comes down to it, because of the fact that they were the first women to main event Raw, it put a major spotlight on the women's division. And it was because of these women, these two particular women, it started paving the way for the women's division to get away from the bra and panties bullshit. Trish said in the Rivalries episode that she wore pants a lot of the times that she was wrestling because of the fact that there's a time to look at my butt, go buy the magazine, you can do it there, but for now, let me show you what I can do in the ring. And with Lita, it was much the same. She wore low-cut pants that showed off a thong, and she had the fishnet shirts on with very low-cut shirts, and a lot of times she would take her shirt off and just be there in a bra. But for the main part, she was there to show you that, yeah, I'm fucking drop-dead sexy, but I can also kick the shit out of you all day long.
Right. Well, and, to kind of talk about that, the whole bra and panty matches thing, a lot of people, it's not needed, but also I think a lot of people tend to forget that back in those times, I mean, if I remember right, they even said that they would not do it if they weren't comfortable enough to do it.
Right, there were some.
There were some, and so, my thing is, I don't say it is a good thing that it's gone away. We've gotten away from that, but at the same time, a lot of times that's what really got I hate to say it, but that's kind of what got people into the women.
What did?
Bra and panties.
It did, but I think and you're right in that aspect. But that was the only way. Once they got their foot in the door, well, Trish and Lita got their foot in the door. Then you started to say, you know what? Maybe these women can wrestle. It's not just about their tits and ass.
Right, and I'm not saying that. Oh, that's the only reason why. There was a lot of things there, but I think a lot of people discredit that just because we're looking at. I think the problem that we have especially as wrestling fans, we try to associate what's going on now versus how it was back then.
Right.
And if we held, because let's face it, if we held WWE by today's standards, they wouldn't be on fucking air.
Swear to God. Sorry, go ahead. Keep going, Johnny. You're fine.
So with that being said, I mean, I'm not discrediting that. It was awesome what Lita and Trish did. There's no denying that. I mean, it made me a fan of women's wrestling. But there is, I think we devalue that they did go through that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like saying,
Right,
oh, it was
like
so
Heather
horrible.
said. I'm sorry. I was going to say, just like Heather said, they had the sex appeal, but they also had the athletic appeal that in any rivalry that they had, they could go from one could be heel, then can go face, the other could be heel, the other could go face. So they had that going for them as well to keep it going. But they also had look that the guys wanted to see them wrestle, but they also had that appeal for the male.
Sorry, Ronnie.
That's okay.
You tell them, baby.
That is right. Letting her opinions known too.
Daddy's working on getting her a bottle here real quick.
No.
So.
And then when, like, by today's standards, when they come out and say for the first ever or the breakthrough with women's evolution, yes, they brought Trish and Lita back for that, but it's like they forget about the things that those two did along with others that were actually first ever. It's like that's all been discredited. And the ones nowadays are the ones that they're saying, okay, first ever cage or Hell in a Cell match, first ever ladder match. And these two kind of paved that way to start that. And they had many firsts.
Well, actually, before you go into Johnny, Ronnie, the first ladder match for women happened with Lita.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it actually leads into my point that I was fixing to make.
Mm-hmm.
What's sad to see is that they're doing all these firsts with the current women. And it's almost like what Trish and Lita and, Mickie James and Natalya and all these women that were back then, it's like that didn't matter that they had some of the incredible, because let's put getting back to the Lita and Trish thing, their main event match, one of the best matches on Raw. It was a damn good match. There was a bad spot in there a couple times.
Oh yes.
I thought she almost
it was a
broke
good
her
match.
neck again. I'm like, holy shit.
And so for me, it's just kind of disappointing because it's like all that work that Chyna and Trish and Lita and all these wonderful women did back then, WWE doesn't seem to really highlight the fact that there's been a lot of stuff that they did that, frankly, this new bunch, they couldn't hold a candle to.
No, they couldn't. And honestly, if you look at it, if you compare it from yesteryear or so to say to today, back then the women at most got 2 to 3 minutes for their matches. No matter what their caliber was, and no matter what that match was. If it wasn't sex appeal selling it, it was 2 to 3 minutes and then you're done. Today, they're getting 10 to 15 minutes for their matches.
Sometimes even more.
Exactly. So if it wasn't for Trish and Lita doing what they did, especially with that main event match on that Monday Night Raw, where they went for damn near 10 minutes, the women today wouldn't be getting the showcase that they get.
Couldn't you make the argument, though, especially when it comes to the women's division, that sometimes less is more?
Sometimes, yes, but it what it was down to is you had Trish and Lita having these matches that were 2 to 3 minutes long, but they were tearing the fucking house down.
Right. Well, and that's what I mean. It's like, because when you compare it to then and now, yes, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. The women getting more time on TV is a good thing, but I hate to say it, the quality of the matches are not as good.
No.
They're not as good. Whereas I can distinctly remember a lot of matches from back then that were 2 to 3 minutes long, and they stuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of why I pose that question of, do you think that in that case sometimes maybe it was better that they didn't get as much TV time because it made us want more of it?
Yeah, it could be, but there's also the fact of if they had, again, comparing then and now, you have a handful of women that are at the same caliber that Lita and Trish were back then.
I can agree with that, yeah.
And they're getting more time now. If you had given Trish and Lita that same amount of time...
Jesus, fuck. Come on, kid.
I think she's
dealing
dealing with a little bit of the side effects from the shots today.
And let's not take how similar, like, these two women in particular had to go through some shit.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they had to sit there. They had to not only break down the walls of this is all women are capable of. They also had to sit there and remind everybody that yes, we could be valets, but we're wrestlers too.
Right.
Because you had Lita with Team Extreme, Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy, and
She started out with Tess and Albert. Trish did.
yeah.
Well, that's what I'm more referring to. I mean, look at what they went through. Lita, damn, it's amazing her career survived.
Right.
True.
Because not only did she have that nasty bump, but she also the deal with Matt.
That's, yeah.
And then poor Trish having to sit there and bark like a dog.
For Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
I mean, these women went through some shit.
Yeah, they were treated as sexual objects. But that whole thing with Edge and Lita, that was her choice to reinvent her character. As much as it was Matt and Edge's choice to continue on with that story because of what happened. Until it became too real and too much for them to handle. But with that, you also had the issue of adding in the whole pregnancy storyline for Lita with Kane.
Oh, God.
That was awful.
That
Yes.
was god awful. One of the worst storylines WWE ever had.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, which I'm surprised they didn't bring up in the rivalry thing. Because
If-
that was another major
had done-
fight between Trish and Lita.
Was it? I don't
Yeah.
remember that.
Yep.
I mean, I'll say this. The storylines today are way better than that fucking storyline. I can tell you that much right now.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, today you got better storylines for the women. But I feel like if you had these storylines in place with the talent from back then, if you had that, I feel like the women's division today would be through the roof. If you had given the women from back then, I'm talking Jazz, Jacqueline, Trish, Lita, Victoria, all of them. If you'd given them the storylines that you're giving the women today, you would have a 10 times better product. What do you guys think?
I don't know.
I think the
because
storylines that they wrote for those two were kind of like tailored for them to make their rivalries unique.
Mhm.
Whereas you've got today, they're writing the storylines and they're not fitting. I mean, you can take the Sasha and Bailey. We know that the two of them are friends. We know the two of them were put in a storyline where they hate each other, and you can't turn Bailey heel. Whereas with Lita and Trish, they could come off with a heel or a face character to pull off the storyline. It can't be done today because certain talent doesn't fit well with the heel character, where other talent fits better with a face character, and trying to flip-flop their roles or trying to tailor this kind of a rivalry like Lita and Trish had, it has not worked with the current roster.
I'll say this. Not going to say that you're wrong, Ron, because I do agree with you. I do agree with her.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where I'm going to disagree. It's not that they can't. It's not that Bailey can't go heel.
They won't let her.
They won't let her. They're rehashing, and another thing with the writers, they don't write new stuff. The stuff that's going on they're trying really hard with Becky and Charlotte and Ronda, is they're trying to rewrite in little tweaks Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon, and it's not fucking working because they're not. The thing between Becky and the McMahons right now is the McMahons aren't heels. Vince is trying, but he's 75 fucking years old and can't fucking really do it anymore.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is they're rewriting. They're trying to rewrite.
They're trying to catch lightning.
They're trying to retell old stories. They're trying to catch lightning in a bottle. Again, they're trying to force that lightning into the bottle, and it's not working.
Well, even when they put Bailey into that match with Alexa. Yeah, with that
kendo stick on a pole.
Kendo stick, right. It's like she just had, like with Lita and Trish, I could see that kind of a match and both of them being able to pull that one off. Whereas there was reservation on Bailey's part, like she was hesitating, or when she did do the move, it was like a love tap.
Right.
And it's the same aspect with, like, back then, it's like they gave these two a little bit more leniency where they could go out and do a little bit more than what they're being scripted and portraying on TV with the match itself, with the move sets and stuff like that. They're like very cautious.
Right. I think Bailey could pull off a heel. They just have to let her be her and let it happen organically. You can't force. They're trying to force everything, and it's not working. And I go back to this, and the reason that it's different back then than it was now is once all these superstars, Vince McMahon has control of everything, justifiably so, because of what happened to him before NWO and all that stuff took over. I know we're getting off topic with Trish and Lita, but it kind of ties into what we're talking about, because he let Trish and Lita go. And you look at it today, they're not letting the women do their thing. I can almost guarantee you that Charlotte, if she listened to her dad, she probably would be better off. And Sasha and Becky's doing okay. I'm still not sold on. She tries talking too fast, and sometimes you can't understand a damn thing she's saying, or she tries to sound too tough. Just be yourself. And they're not letting these people do that. And that's the problem.
Not.
Back then, they let them do that.
Right. Right, and you could see it in the match. You could see it in the promos with how they would speak back and forth to each other. And when they were in the match, you could see the chemistry that the two of them had together. Mm-hmm. And, even to this day, Lita's the godmother to her son. So it's like they still have that chemistry, even when they brought them back for the women's evolution and stuff like that. They're a little bit slower, as everybody does when they get older, and they were a little bit more scripted, you could see, but it was nothing like when they had their feuds back and forth, and when they mixed it up with the Christian and Jericho and Matt Hardy and Titus and all them. It's just, that is what the difference is between the rivalries we grew up watching versus the rivalries that you see now. I mean, compare that to the Nikki Bella, Brie Bella rivalry, which was atrocious. The rivalries today just don't hold a candle to those two.
No, of course not. But you got to remember also, Trish and Lita came into the company a month apart from each other.
Yes.
Thank you for subscribing, Lil Pump. Interesting name there.
Or Aaron Reed.
They came into the company a month apart from each other, and really, with their careers paralleling like that, that's the only reason why that their storylines seem to be tailored for them. It's because they came in so close together, and they basically had the same thoughts of each other. Whether it be Trish sitting there saying, oh, well, look at Lita. She's doing all these flips. She's doing all these things. She's going up against these guys. I'm never going to get the TV time. Whereas Lita's sitting there saying, oh, look at this girl. She's so gorgeous. She's so pretty. She has, like, the perfect body. I'm never going to get TV time. Meanwhile, Lita was the first one to show up on TV with Ese Rios.
Yep.
And then a month later, you had Trish show up and put together Prince Albert and Test, forming TNA. So,
Which was a play on tits and ass.
of course. So,
Right, she was more of like the eye candy.
Yes.
Where Lita was more of like the tomboyish.
She was Lita, as they said in the episode. Lita was more the bad girl that you did not want to bring home to mom, whereas Trish was the good girl you brought home to mom. So.
Trish was the
sassy good girl that was the perfect public figure for mom to see.
I was talking about Lita. Lita had the tattoos.
Mm-hmm. So, with that being said, you could look at the people that are on the roster today and go off of that same premise. You have these women that came into the business together. So you could be giving them sort of the same storylines. Sasha Bailey. But actually let one of them pull the fucking heel trigger and go with it.
You know what I found kind of, I kind of drew a comparison. You realize they're giving us female versions of male Attitude Era storylines.
Yes,
Yep.
with Sasha and Bailey, you got the Rock and Sock connection.
Even before then, you also had the This Is Your Life segment.
Yeah, that fucking failed miserably.
Yeah.
Right, but it was a play on
Well, the difference with that is that was Alexa Bliss trying to get under Bailey's skin, whereas with Mankind and The Rock, that was Mankind trying to become The Rock's tag team partner.
Right,
That's
right.
where it failed, yeah.
But that's what I mean. They're giving female spins off of male Attitude Era storylines. They're not producing. That's why I said it. I get that people say that what's going on right now with the Becky and Charlotte thing, and that it's good storytelling, but it's why I say it was shit from the start, because it's not original.
No.
It's not an original story. You're looking at something that's already been done a lot better.
Yeah, it's already been done at its best, to be honest with you.
Right.
You can't do any better.
And I'm not saying that, like, if I hadn't, and again, it goes back to kind of the problem with the being an older fan, is I'm sure if somebody was seeing it for the first time, yeah, it's probably the greatest thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem, realistically, for especially with older fans, is we've seen it already.
Right.
Right. And then the other thing is too, and Bob had put it in the chat that the women weren't portrayed in the best light either during that time. Whereas like today, you would not see any of these current wrestlers in the ring on all fours, barking like a dog in skimpy lingerie or bra and panties. That would just not go well with the SJW at this.
And the sponsors.
Right, the sponsors as well that would pull.
Well, look at it this way. We just had a recent example of this. Nia Jax was supposed to take on Dean Ambrose, and they had to cancel the match. But back then, you had China freaking wrestling men.
For the IC title.
And it was awesome.
Yeah.
Because China was kick-ass.
Yeah.
Nia Jax can't even fucking jump 2 inches off the fucking ground.
This is why when people bring up like how bad it was for the attitude, how bad the attitude era was for women as far as how they were portrayed, it's why I have a tendency to defend it, because while yes there were some issues there and there were some problems with how they did things, you also got, to me, these women back then were much more believable as badasses than any woman you have on the roster today.
I agree.
Well, for me, like as a kid that grew up in the late '90s, early 2000s, you gotta think of the time period at the time. This was back during, fucking. We had Girls Gone Wild. We had fucking pop stars that was barely dressed. They was singing about, sexual stuff. And, as a kid growing up, I didn't really give a fuck about women's wrestling because, it was portrayed to me as like, there was just ballet slash, sexual things. But when Trish and Lita came along, that's when it made me care about women's wrestling. That's why I'm such a big fan of it as much as I am today, especially with Asuka. Like,
I think a lot of us. I'm sorry, Bobby. Go ahead.
No, it's just to finish up my point. It's just like, if you look at the time period then and now, yeah, some things hasn't changed, especially with the pop shit. But like, women's wrestling has gotten a hell of a lot better than what it used to be.
And we're not denying that fact.
No, we're not.
We're not denying it. But see, for like older fans, and this is going back to my point, it has a lot to do with when people started watching. Because for fans like me, to be honest, I started giving a shit about women's wrestling when China was on the scene.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And China was before them. So we were already getting invested. By the time Trish and Lita got into it, and then it just made it that much better when, they did have their main event match.
Right. I mean, I could only imagine if China was there today.
Yeah.
If we had China do you think, and I'm just asking this question before we go back to Trish and Lita, do you think that, and I know it's off topic, do you think China would be being pushed the way she was back in the late 1990s, 2000s when she got there? Now?
Oh, God, no.
With the roster that they have?
God, no.
No.
No. Not at all.
I tend to agree just because of who they have on their roster. The wrestling is better, but China was. You know what? I'm going to disagree.
I was just going to say,
I think China probably would be the standard bearer. Charlotte wouldn't be in that position. China would be.
Not only that, China would be the main competition for people like Tamina and Nia Jax,
And
making
Charlotte.
it a more believable situation.
I think China, Ronda Rousey would probably be a main event. I think.
Possibly.
I can see your point. I have so little faith in what they're doing.
That's what I'm saying, though, Johnny. If with the story they have, the stories they have now, but the talent they had back in China in Trish and Lita's day, would it not be better? That's my point.
If it was done in the vein of this is the like if you still had kind of the Attitude Era, but you had a more serious the women were more seriously taken. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Then yeah, I would agree. It would have been a lot better back then. I would agree with that. Yes.
Now I'm saying today, if half the women on the roster that are on the roster today had even just an ounce of half of the talent that was back then, with just 2 or 3 of the women on the roster back then, you had Molly Holly, you had Ivory, Jacqueline,
I mean,
Jazz.
I was actually talking about, I think China would be a main eventer today, even at today's standards. I think she would be.
We've moved on to a different topic from that.
Oh, I didn't hear. I didn't know we moved on from my question.
Yes, we did.
Okay, so what
We went back. Well, yes, your question got answered.
And everybody said no.
Well, they said no. I agreed with you.
Oh, okay.
So yes, your question got answered.
Well, I think. Well, why does well, let's go back to that, because I didn't know, because I'm sitting here with the baby trying to get her to fall asleep.
She's probably not gonna fall asleep.
Why do you say no? Why don't you think China would be a main event today?
Don't all talk over each other now. Okay.
I mean, I'm just
No,
Because
I'm trying
of
to
all the
formulate
oversen-
what my
because
I'm
of
trying to formulate the thought.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
I think
guess
because
what-
everyone's so oversensitive today that it would have been an impossibility.
Well,
Trish, how can it be oversensitive?
We're not talking about China facing the men like she was back then. No, we're talking about her sticking to the women's division.
Oh, okay.
Do you think that she would get the push that she got back then, just with the women's division?
That's my question.
I think she'd kind of be stuck in a similar situation like Natty, where
Yeah.
to me,
Yeah.
China facing Alexa Bliss would not make sense to the current fan base, where
But
Natty
Nia,
can come out and face
Let her finish her
anybody,
thought.
but not
Because I'm gonna
go
bring this
over.
up.
okay.
But you got to remember, there's people like Nia Jax and Tamina Snuka on the roster. They're the same height, about the same weight as China was.
No.
So
China was only 180 pounds.
True, but to kind of back up Ronnie's point, by all rights, Natty should be the face of the women's division.
I agree.
absolutely.
Her and Charlotte. I'm sorry, everybody can shit on fucking Becky or say that shit on Charlotte. Charlotte deserves, and I'll continue to say it. Charlotte deserves to be where she's at.
And and so that's what my fear for China would be, is that yeah, she get a push every now and then, but not to the level that I think we would expect her to be. Because that's the thing I think that people tend to forget. We're going off of what our expectation, not what WWE would do.
No, I'm not even just our expectation. I'm sitting there saying, when you break it down to who's on the roster, you have the women like Charlotte, Tamina Snuka, Charlotte, and even Natalya would be believable to fight against China. Hell, Lita took on China and nearly beat her.
Yes. I'm I'm not. It's just
As
a
far as
question.
believability, yes, I will agree with that. That there would be a lot of people that China could face, and it'd be a believable match. What I'm saying is, I don't think she would be as big or as well remembered.
I think it would be more she'd fall to the wayside and they would use her where they saw fit, which
Well,
wouldn't give
I'm gonna
her
say
the chance to shine.
I'm gonna say this right now. They're doing the same thing that they did with fucking Nia Jax that they did with China. They're trying to.
They're trying to, yes. I
Yes.
agree with you there because with her coming out at the Rumble, with her winning the Women's Evolution, it's just they're trying to make her the next ninth wonder of the world. And it's not
Well, that's
working.
why they're also calling her their irresistible force.
Right, and and you see it's not working.
There's a key difference there. China could wrestle.
Yes.
Nia Jax can't even fucking walk 2 feet.
So.
Okay. That's all. I just thought I'd ask that question.
Now, what's your point on my question?
What's your question? I didn't catch it because I thought we're still talking about what I was talking about. What's your question?
If the storylines they were running today were done with the talent of the Attitude Era and the Ruthless Aggression Era out of the women, would the products not be better today?
If it hadn't been done before, yes. So if this Becky storyline, if they didn't have a Stone Cold Steve Austin storyline, and this wasn't that storyline that they're trying, and I'm throwing quotes up because it's nowhere fucking near. It's not even a fucking 1/100th of what that feud was. I would probably say it might be a little bit better because it's something new and fresh. We haven't seen it. But it depended on how they told the story. And I don't think they're smart enough to tell that story anyway.
Well, that's even like a TV series that's been on for 7, 8 seasons. You see it for the first time with one of the characters that everyone loves, and then you're down to your 6th and 7th season, and you try to rehash it with another character along that storyline. And that's what the problem with today. There's just, like you said, there's no fresh storylines. It's repeat, rehash, redo using current talent, and the current talent is not making the story believable to the old fans.
Wendy is at that stage of she needs to be moving in order to sleep. So.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I put her down 4 times now, and she's cried every single time I put her down.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh, not ready.
Now, I think she may be having a little bit of an issue with side effects from the shots too.
That
I was
too,
gonna
she
say,
thinks she's
yeah.
teething.
Yeah, she could be teething.
Boy, did we go off on a tangent that had nothing to do with the rivalry.
Well, actually, in a way, it ties into it because, you know, with today's storylines, you had that storyline between Sasha Banks and
Right.
Bayley that was very similar to Trish and Lita. However, they were not smart enough to let Bayley be the one to be the heel for once.
Right.
So that fucked that entire storyline. And then, of course, they sat there and put them through friend counseling, which puts them in the same storyline as Daniel Bryan and Kane. So it's just like, okay, really? We have to see this again?
Yep.
And it's only been 5 years?
Right, and they're doing the, okay, well, we did it with the men, let's now do a storyline but involve the women.
Right.
And it's the same thing, the first ever, and for the new fans, yes, that's why they're into it the way that they are, because they haven't seen it before where we have seen it, but it's been done with the men, and the men pulled it off. We're seeing it now using the women, and it's not coming across the way we have seen it. It's coming across the way the women are doing it, and it's not believable.
Right, and that's more because of the fact that they are not letting the right women do the right things.
Right.
Yeah, they're still doing on the first evers, because now this Sunday they're doing a first ever women's tag team championship, and that's not true.
Yes. They've had women's tag team champions back in the 70s and 80s, which didn't work because of the fact that the women again only got a 2 to 3 minute match each and every time. And that's back in the days of the Fabulous Moolah and Mae Young.
Right, and you see what's happening with that is they've got all these women in this chamber match Sunday, and it's left no individuals for storylines because they're all caught up into this tag team. And then when they finally do crown somebody, it's like, okay, well, you've got the two rosters. They're going to be bouncing back and forth with whoever they have as these teams, and it's leaving people like Asuka off the card, not having storylines. It's leaving where you've got like Ruby Riott, Sarah Logan, and Liv Morgan. You've got three of them, which they'll probably do like the New Day effect and Freebird rule. So it's like you don't have an actual division that can hold a tag team title because each roster, it's going to be between the two till they end up doing the brand split. There's not enough on Raw. There's not enough on SmackDown. Just like right now, there's nobody for Asuka's belt. You've got limited people for Ronda's belt right now. You've got injuries to take into effect. I mean, in that case, we lost Ember
for an elbow surgery.
And then Lana was supposed to be with Naomi. You ended up with Carmella. So that took her from the singles because there's not enough of the women to go around for this type of title right now.
Now, that being said, I think they're going to unify the women's division.
I think so, too.
It's coming.
You would think they have to. I mean, it's like the tag team with the men. I mean, you have teams that are set teams. You don't see them going off and fighting individually till they split the team up. And with the women, you really can't do that.
That's not true. There is enough men on that roster that they can make tag teams.
Yeah, the men I'm saying there is, but you don't have that with the women. That's the problem.
That's
There's not enough women
I thought she said it's the same as the men. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
No, what she's saying with that is we're going to get what we are getting now with the men. We're going to see the same teams fighting over and over and over
right,
again.
Yeah.
Well, there's, like I said, but that's what I'm saying. There's enough men on each show for them to make tag teams. They just don't fucking do it.
Yes, but she's just making that comparison because that's what the women's division is.
They won't combine the men's division, at least until probably closer to the Fox deal taking effect. But that's just that's my thinking, my opinion. Not saying it's going to happen, but others looking intently at.
Yeah. Ryan, do you mean men's and women's world championships?
What do you mean?
Because you said in the chat 6 belts: World, Intercontinental, U.S., men's tag, women's tag, and that's it.
No, they ain't gonna. The men's division is gonna stay the same. There's not enough women. What we're saying is there's not enough women on the roster to have 2 shows.
No, there's not. There really isn't. And frankly, that goes along with they're going to have to unify the women's title because otherwise it's going to make that title diminish in reputation because it's going to be easier to get the world title than it is to get the tag team titles.
Right.
I didn't see the comment there, Ryan. I'm sorry. It's going to be a night for us, folks. Well, I think we've pretty much hit everything with the rivalry itself and what.
Is there anything? Well,
because basically all that's left is when it comes down to it, at the very end of their careers, it was Lita who retired Trish because Trish retired first. And it was by their choice because they wanted that final match, and it was in Toronto. And also, Trish and Lita were the first women to actually have a match at WrestleMania along with Jazz. So also for you people out there saying that Vince is racist, they would not have given Jazz, a black female, a shot at having a match within WrestleMania.
Or a shot at the title. In fact, she was a champion, I think.
She won that match.
She was
it
the
was
first
a triple
black
threat for the
female
women's title,
champion.
and she won it.
What's that, Johnny?
She was the first black female champion in WWE.
No, Jacqueline was.
No?
Jacqueline was.
Jacqueline.
Oh, Jack, I got the two confused.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Well, they were both extremely jacked up black women, so.
You're fired, Johnny. You're done.
That's it.
Well, Johnny, your contract's ending,
So, there again, yet another proof positive that there is no racism within that company. As long as brass goes. Sorry to tell you, folks. So.
And I think that, and like Trish, I think it was Trish that said it in the thing. This feud was Rock Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
As far as the women go, it's
Right,
far and away
yeah.
better back then, that feud, than what they're doing now. I will say that. And again, I will say this, like I said at the beginning of the show. These two women were the evolution, are the reason why the women are where they are today.
It has
Not
nothing.
because of the, and I get what Johnny's saying. Yes, it got eyes on them. Not because of the bra and panties matches. Not because of the tits and asses. And not because Charlotte Flair is Ric Flair's daughter.
It wasn't even Paige and AJ.
I mean, they're the newer version of it. I will say this. I would give more credit to Paige and to Neil Dashwood, i.e., I keep forgetting her name. Emma. And Summer Rae for this newer wave of women's evolution. But Trish and Lita, and I'll even throw Victoria, Mickie James,
Jacqueline.
Molly Holly, Jacqueline, Jazz, because Jazz is still wrestling today.
Yep.
They are essentially the beginning of what women could do, if that makes sense. So they're taking that concept of the women's evolution back then, bringing it to today. They're failing miserably at it, but that's pretty much all I have to say.
You're sure?
Yes. Bobby, you shut the fuck
That's
up.
your final answer.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
With that being said, I think we covered this rivalry and went on to a few other topics as well. Again, folks, give us a few minutes after this show ends, and we'll be over on my channel for Raging Inc. tonight.
What are we talking about?
Tonight, we are going to be covering the wrestling talk, continuing the wrestling talk, and actually going to be ranting and raving about the fans again.
And I'm going to be ranting about Lowe's.
There's that too. So, with that being said, let's start this little goodbye train off. We'll start with you, Johnny. Any plans for your Twitch channel this evening,
Or any final thoughts about tonight's show?
Arguably, there's nobody else going to be like Trish and Lita. Nobody compares to them.
I agree with that.
Notorious, I'll tell you what. We'll talk about. I'm gonna be on for a little bit, but I promised Heather I would step away.
Bullshit.
You won't? No,
Sorry.
I am, because I'm probably gonna go to bed. Not. Notorious, if you go over to Heather's channel, I'll tell you whether or not I think Charlotte's going to be the champion or not. But you have to go over to her channel to find out. There's a cliffhanger.
Not a very big one. Bobbit, what about you?
As far as rivalries go, this is one of the, besides Stone Cold Vince, this is the rivalry that I cared about for women's, and I don't think there's ever going to be one that's going to come close to this. It made me actually care about women's wrestling, and back during a time where women wasn't in the best of light. So, yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
Ronnie?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of Bobbitt. I mean, these were two believable talents that any storyline that they were given or any feud that they were put in, they could pull it off and make it believable for the fans and even for the ones to this day. I mean, like Bobbitt said, with who we've got today, it's not working with the storylines that they had. And they are truly the first ever for anything that went on in the women's division that has paved the way for who is on the roster today.
And Trek.
I just remember loving this rivalry. We used to talk about it at work all the time. It shows how long I've been in my job, but we talked about every single time that these guys had a match. We were like both sides of the fence, Trish Lita, Trish Lita, Trish Lita. I was always a Lita guy because I thought she was a badass. And I thought she was gorgeous too. And she was a gorgeous woman and stuff, that she's a badass. And they kicked the shit out of each other. They're awesome. And to hear that they're best friends later on, it's like, just made it even better because you knew they gelled together so well. So it's like, it's just, they caught lightning in the bottle. I think they were the best feud along with Austin versus McMahon.
Okay. So with that being said, I think we can end it here.
Don't forget tomorrow. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't forget tomorrow we have This Week in Wrestling over on Bobbitt's channel. We will be giving our predictions. And then we have, what is it? What is it, Bobbitt?
Chamber Balls.
Chamber Balls. Okay.
Oh, lordy lord. All right, you heard it here first, folks. We're getting Chamber Bobs. We'll also be giving our predictions for Elimination Chamber tomorrow.
That's what I just said.
Didn't sound like it to me. Anyway, you folks have a good night, and we'll see you over on my channel in just a few minutes.
Bye, guys.